Welcome, Jane. I work with Tom a lot on a bunch of different projects, so I'm glad to have you with us today. And for everybody else too, Alicia, Shane, general contractor, awesome. Glad to have you here with us. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure thing. Let me actually turn my camera on. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Railsbach. I'm a customer accounts manager for Central Coast Community Energy. We're going to go through a really quick introduction to our company, and then we're going to hand things over to Chris so she can get to the meat of what we're actually here to talk about today. And we'll have a chance to hear from our program stream real quick, and then end some time for Q&A. So, and if I remember, Chris, you don't mind being interrupted mid-presentation. So if you do have a question, just go ahead and put that in the chat. So Central Coast Community Energy is, can you see? Sophia, can you back up a slide, please? Okay, go ahead. They're different than mine. Central Coast Community Energy, we are currently in 33 communities, over 5 counties. We actually have 4 counties enrolled and 29 different cities in our service area. And we're happy to announce that recently we Atascadero approved, and so we'll begin enrollment with them in January of 2024, which at that point, there is some timing as far as eligibility of projects, but we're excited that we'll be able to get them in on these programs as well. Sophia, next slide, please. So how does a community choice aggregate work? Basically what it comes down to is we buy the electricity that goes into the system. PG&E and SCE delivers the energy, maintains the lines, and does the billing for our joint customers. And then that energy obviously goes into your place of business or to the homes in our service area. The advantage to this is you get an opportunity to kind of help the environment. We also have the choice. Actually, can you skip the next slide? I think the next slide is what I want to talk about there. No, it isn't. Okay. But one of the big differences between Central Coast Community Energy and an investor-owned utility is that we do not have investors, and so we don't have to pay out shareholders. And so the money that we do generate is we're able to help put a lot more money back into the community. We do these to electrify homes, businesses, to help us meet our long-term goals, which is what you're seeing here. Our goal by the end of 2025 is to have 60% clean and renewable energy, and then 100% by 2030. This is 15 years ahead of California's stated goals. And I think let's go ahead to the next one, please. Yeah, so that's kind of, I think most of you know a lot about us. It is kind of important when you get to these programs that people actually are 3CE customers. Generally, that's not a problem if they're in our service area. Over 95% of accounts are 3CE customers. So now I'd like to introduce Chris Wright with Frontier Energy, who will take us through the meat of this. Chris?
Thanks so much, Jeff, and thank you all for joining us today. I do want to mention we're a really small group today, which is great because it gives us more time to chat back and forth. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. You can either drop them in the chat or the Q&A. And if I don't see it, Sophia will. You can also use the raise your hand button on Zoom, and Sophia can elevate you to speak. And that way we can have a little bit more time for a discussion. This is meant to be a really basic introduction to charging stations with a little bit of what it is, how to do it, why to do it. So again, if you have really specific questions, please let me know as we go through or follow up with me afterward. So next slide, please, Sophia. So we're going to start just by making sure that we're all on the same page and thinking about charging locations. And this diagram shows you how and where people are charging their vehicles today. So as you see on the wheel here, about 60% of charging is happening at home. And that could be a single family residence, a multifamily residence, a boat, it's wherever you live, but those folks tend to be charging their vehicles overnight. Then we see about 30% of the charging is happening at workplaces, and that tends to be slower charging during the day. Destination charging is what you might see at a grocery store or an entertainment complex or at a state park or national park. And then en route charging are those stations that are between here and there. And in Central California, we talk a lot about what all of those charging stations that are happening around Kettleman City, in that medium range where people are just stopping on their way from going from Northern California to Southern California. So for the most part, what we're going to talk about today is workplace charging, destination charging, and a really big emphasis on charging at multifamily dwellings. Next slide, please. And then just again, to make sure that we're all on the same page with terms, I really try to avoid acronyms, but they slip in every now and again. So an EVSE is a piece of charging station equipment. And smart charging is a charging station that could communicate. If the charging station takes a credit card or accepts a key fob as payment, it's a smart charging station. We talk a lot about dwell time, and that's the amount of time that a car or a truck or a bus is sitting still before it moves to a different destination. And in some places, people have a really short dwell time, 30 minutes at the grocery store. And in other times, they'll have a very long dwell time overnight when they're at home. Charging stations have multiple connectors or ports. Those are the little cords that come out from the charging station and plug into a car. And some places call those positions, some call them stations, some call them different words. I use ports. And then we'll also be talking about kilowatt, which is the unit measurement of electricity, and a kilowatt hours, which is the amount of the number of kilowatts that a device uses during an hour. So just because something has 70 kilowatts doesn't mean the device will use all 70 during an hour. So useful terms. And then we have one more level setting to go. Next slide, please. And that is about the level of charging. So the levels of charging, you can really think about these in terms of how far can you go in an amount of time. And I like to use the analogy of one of those blue or green or yellow kiddie pools that you put in the backyard in the summer. And think about how you fill up that kiddie pool with water. So level 1 charging, every electric vehicle can do this. And every electric vehicle comes with a cord already in the car that will plug into the car and plug into any wall socket. You can also get an EVSE, which is a special device. That's the picture that's on the right there, that is a little bit faster than level 1 charging. For many people, level 1 charging will meet their daily need. The batteries are big enough now that you only need to replace a few kilowatts of range every day while you're level 1 charging. This is like filling up your kiddie pool with a kitchen faucet. You will fill it up, it takes a long time. Level 2 charging is what we see as more common, and this is very typical in workplaces, it's very typical in residences, whether it's multifamily or single family. It can just be a special plug in the wall, a 240 volt plug that's very similar to what you use for a dryer or what you use for an RV. But for the most part, people are using EVSEs, and that could be something that hangs on the wall, or it could be something that sits on a pedestal and has multiple ports and is a smart charger. These are more like filling up your kiddie pool with a garden hose. And these chargers have different rates of speeds, just like some hoses have a bigger diameter than others. Then the last type of charger is a DC fast charger. They are always an EVSE. They are a much bigger piece of equipment. They take up more room on the property. They will always have 2 connectors, and they are very much like filling up the kiddie pool with a fire hose. It is going to fill up very, very fast. And even those stations have different ratings, and some of them fill up faster than others. However, I will also tell you there's the rate of speed that a car charges depends upon the car, not necessarily the charging station. But we're going to talk for multifamily properties mostly about level 2. That is most common because people who are at home have a longer dwell time. So next slide, please. Now, a little bit beyond basic charging. So one-way charging, a level 2 charger or a level 1 charger that hangs inside the garage of somebody's house is a dumb charger. It's not communicating with anything other than the car. So smart charging is the next level up, and you're going to see these mostly in multifamily properties. They can accept payment, they transmit data, and they can do some mild communication with the utility. Load management is the next step up, and that is software that is built into the charger, or maybe you can buy afterwards. It's typically built into the charger. And that allows that charging station to communicate with the utility. It can also, that's the way that we avoid having everybody using all of the electricity at one time and going into an artificial peak. The next 2 levels up are vehicle to building and vehicle to grid. And you hear a lot of discussion about that right now. It's bi-directional charging. And it is probably a wave of the future. Right now, it's not very common because there aren't many passenger vehicles that are capable of doing this. We are certainly seeing a lot of this with school buses and transit buses because they're very predictable and they have very big batteries. But we're going to talk most part about level 2 smart charging. So next slide, please. To give you an idea of what do you think is right for your residents or your employees, we do have some toolkits that you can use on the Central Coast Community Energy website. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a link. But the things that you want to know are about your drivers. So who is it that's coming to your property? Are you going to mostly be your employees, which are probably going to be daytime charging? Is it residents, nighttime charging? Is it customers who are coming by and need that shorter time period? We also want to know, particularly for people who are customers or employees, can they charge at home already? Are they showing up at your property completely empty and need a complete refill? Or do they just want to replace the kilowatts that they use getting to work? We also look very much at how far they drive. So if you're thinking of your residents that are driving from your property to an office building downtown can do with slower charging, they will have a fuller battery than someone who is driving from your building to San Jose to work, or your building and going way out into the agricultural areas to work. They will come back with an empty battery. We're going to talk a little bit more about the assigned parking spaces. This has a lot to do with your design and where you deploy them. And then you also want to know where those people are dwelling, where they're stopping, and for how long is that going to be. My general observations are people who are at workplaces will get up in the middle of the day and move their car. So you could have 1 charging station for every 2 cars at a workplace. And at lunchtime, they switch. That's not true at an apartment building. Once somebody comes home from work and parks their car and eats their dinner and puts their jammies on, they are not likely to go out at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and move their car so someone else can pull in there. But for most locations, a 12 kilowatt level 2 charger is going to be the right fit. Next, oh, I should stop here. Any questions? Okay, seeing none in the chat or hands raised, let's go on to the next slide, please, Sophia. So now let's talk about where the right spot in your parking lot is for the charger. We have 2 things that we really want to think about right here. First is the cost to install it. So the place that's going to be the least cost to install it is a place that is close to the electrical panel and it's close to the electrical supply. So sometimes you might have an electrical supply at a parking lot that's not close to the panel, but we can pull from that. And that's typical, for instance, if you have a building that has multiple different, if you have a property that has multiple different buildings, there are probably spaces in that property where there's a connector. We also really want to look for places where we are not digging through concrete. You'll see the middle picture here where it's sitting on grass. It's much easier to trench through grass or dirt than it is to tear up a parking lot and trench through the parking lot. So the first part of it is really looking at where is it going to be the least cost to install this. The next part is going to be with codes and ADA access. And I have the next slides all about ADA. So I'm going to skip over this one, but we do want to think about local codes that might dictate where something goes. A good example is there is a vendor now that sells a charging station that also has digital advertising on it. And so it looks like a billboard. In many places that won't work, that charger won't work because the design codes for the city don't allow that type of digital billboard. So we want to make sure we're complying with that as well. The next two things are thinking about our clients or our people who are using. And we really want to make sure, first of all, that they're safe while they're using the charging station. If it's not safe, then nothing else matters. And safety has a lot to do with thinking of yourself standing in a dark parking lot in the pouring rain in the middle of the night. So are they in a place where they're not going to trip, they're not going to get rained on, they're visible from the street, and it's well lit. The other part is that weather protection, and it's not just pouring rain, but it's walking through a snowbank, which we don't have a lot of problem with here, but it's standing in the fog and it's the bright sun shining onto a screen. And then the last part is amenities. So again, at an apartment complex, most of your folks are going to go home. But if you are offering also a charging station that is available to the public, if somebody is coming in there, what are they going to do during that time? You know, we all get impatient just sitting in line in our car through the Starbucks drive-through. 5 minutes can seem forever, but 20 minutes or 2 hours literally is forever when you're waiting for your car to charge. So can they walk to something that's nearby? Is there a restroom available? Is there something to do? One of the things that we're really seeing more prevalent now is it's not just adjacent to stores, but is it near a park? Is it near a place where I can take my kids and my dogs to play while that car is charging? So before I go on, questions about this? Okay, let's go on and talk about ADA. Everybody's favorite subject. ADA compliance is required with charging stations that are not in assigned parking spaces. So if your office or your property has an assigned parking space, you do not need to be ADA compliant. However, if you have shared parking spaces, then you will need to comply with ADA. And this means even if you have 2 visitor parking spaces, this is what you'll need to do. So the ADA requirements are quite spelled out in the code, and I'm going to give you a link to this in just a minute. You have to have at least one connector, one port adjacent to a van accessible ADA parking space. So not just a regular parking space. At least one connector. This also means you have to have space for the path of travel. So a thing to think about with this is if you are installing the charging station on a sidewalk, then that sidewalk still has to be ADA accessible, and you might need to make the sidewalk a little bit wider. If you're installing the charging station in a parking spot, then it's going to eat up some of the space of the parking spot, and you might need to extend the parking spaces. So you can see here in this drawing that these parking spaces are 108 inches long. That's about, most parking spaces are 96 inches long. So we have allowed a little bit more space to have that charging station in there. Now your designer, or Shane, as you get to be the contractor doing these, is going to be really familiar with ADA and is going to make sure you're in compliance with it. But I am going to pop into the chat a link to a great presentation that was put together by SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, in partnership with DGS, the Division of State Architect. that really makes this simple to understand, because there are lots of variables on how you do this. You also, your city code where you are will tell you what type of signage you need to have about EV charging. So that is not a requirement in state codes. Signage is a requirement by city code, but you do have to mark parking spots as being EV charging. And that might be with a sign, that might be painting on the ground, like a ADA painting. So questions about this. This is always a complicated topic in how we're ADA compliant. Seeing no questions, I also want to give you my little caution tale on ADA. Right now, ADA compliance has to do with the parking space, not with the charging equipment itself. And I have seen some of these implemented in a way that the person who is driving that ADA accessible van could not physically reach the connector and get back to their car with it. And I've also seen a few units from new startup companies that are really thinking about a space-saving design, and their space-saving design has the charging port, the connector, up so high that if you were seated in a mobility device, you wouldn't be able to stand up and grab that cord. So as you're looking, or as we're looking with you at different pieces of equipment, we really want to make sure that that equipment is going to be ADA accessible as well. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So I love pictures that show you what not to do. And these are pictures that some folks have sent me and others that I have taken myself. Some good examples of what not to do. And I really did try to hide some of the manufacturers, but you can tell anyway. And you can see on the left, the first two pictures, top and bottom, are about weather, that those are tricky places for anybody to walk through during inclement weather. So we want to think about that. One of the things that you will point out, although the bottom one shows a flooded parking lot, really think about drainage and look for low places. Every parking lot has low places. And it's, you know, we hop over puddles. Now imagine yourself trying to stand in a puddle for a minute or two while you're connecting your car. So avoid the low places. On the top row, that middle slide is a fairly new installation and happens to be out in Monterey at a hotel. And they cut back that bush to put the charging station in there, but that bush is that ivy is gonna grow over that charging station in a heartbeat. So I would have maybe stripped that completely out of there rather than put it, so you have to cut it back every week. And then also the top picture on the right, you can see is just a cord management problem. That's a tripping hazard right there. And we'd really like to avoid having cords in places where people are either going to fall on them or drive over them. The middle picture on the bottom is a picture I took of my car at a very, very dark place with no lighting. And you'll see I had to keep my headlights on just to be even able to see what I was doing at that charging station. And then the last picture manufacturer sent to me, and that shows you what happens to an LED screen that's exposed to the sun, and that was 3 weeks of exposure. So you know, shading, sometimes we'll just tilt the charging station slightly so that it's not in the path of the setting sun. So questions on this, or anybody want to share something about what they have seen as a to do or not to do with your charging station placement? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. Let's scoot on to our next slide, please. So we do have this little checklist for you that shows you how to assess your parking lot location. And this is in a spreadsheet. It's got quite a bit of detail on it to help you assess things. If you would like this, please let us know. Jeff can get this to you and you can take a look at your own parking spaces. This is not a detailed engineering analysis. This is just a helpful tool for you to say, yes, one would fit here. It would be safe. There are things for people to do, and it would be close enough to the electrical panel that we could make this work. We also have on here some civil upgrades, and that's widening the sidewalk or having to put in a ramp or maybe repaving a whole parking lot. plus the signing and striping. You'll notice that permits is on here, and Shane, this is really for you too. The state of California has a requirement for streamlined permitting, and almost all of the jurisdictions in the Central Coast area are in compliance with that. So for the most part, permits are pretty quick and easy to get, usually within a week, and a standard online process, but you do need to submit load calculations with it. And your installer will know how to do all of this. And part of our concierge service that we're offering with Central Coast is to help you with that. So next one, please. So this kind of winds us up with the big question of how do you collect fees for charging? What should you do? What does the state tell you to do? Well, just like the state doesn't tell a grocery store what they have to charge for milk and doesn't tell anybody else what they need to charge for a beer at the brew pub, there is no one to tell you what you have to charge or can't charge for a charging station. It's up to you and your service provider, and that's someone like ChargePoint or EVgo or Wallbox. It's up to you and your service provider to decide if you want to accept payment and then set the price. There is no rule that says you have to accept payment. You may want to offer charging as an amenity. However, the state of California law says if you are accepting payment, a credit card swipe or an RFID card, starting in January 1, 2023, a couple weeks from now, all new charging stations have to charge by the kilowatt hour. You can't charge by the minute, you can't charge by the use, has to be by a kilowatt hour. And they have to have a measuring device on there that says when you pay for a kilowatt, you get a kilowatt. So it's no different than the way that gasoline stations are done today, or scale at the grocery store, or anything else that is sold by a unit measure. I put on the slide here some examples of charging stations around your area and what they're charging today. So these are all DC fast charging stations, which tend to charge more per kilowatt hour than a level 2 charging station. And you can see it's right around the $43 a kilowatt hour charge. That ChargePoint station on the bottom, the 25 cents a kilowatt hour plus 25 cents a minute, they're going to be able to do that with their existing chargers, but anything that's new that's installed, they will not be able to have that minute charge. Now, some of the networks, the charging station networks like EVgo, like ChargePoint, also have like a member price. So you could join the club and pay a member price, and that's allowed. Just like that happens at the grocery store. If you're a member, you get the sale price. If you're not, you don't. As long as you allow someone to sign up on the spot. So there are some more considerations around charging for charging. I am happy to talk through those with you. They can be a little complicated, but in the end, it's just that we're charging everybody the same amount no matter what. Now, here's a little bit more to think about is that if you are a multifamily property, you could also have the energy from the charging station be part of their monthly utility bill. And that's if everybody's on a separate sub-meter now, we can set it up that way. You could also, if this is only available to your tenants, you could charge a flat monthly fee for using the charging station. And I've got some workarounds to help you figure out how to do that. So, questions about the complicated issue of do we accept payment and how do we accept payment? Okay, I do see Jane says that she wants these full slides later. Yes, everybody is going to get the slides, and the recording of this session will also be available. So Sophia will send this out to everybody so that you have it. All right, Sophia, let's go to the next slide, please. And we're going to go back over to Jeff for a few minutes, and then we're going to wrap up with the, we're going to go to Dan for a few minutes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Bertoldi, Manager of Energy Programs here at Central Coast Community Energy. So wanted to let you know that we have programs to help support your business and your developments. And I'll start with the Electrify Your Ride program. So we have incentives, rebates actually, for electric vehicle chargers, as well as what we're calling EV readiness, which is essentially the work that would be done to install the EV chargers. I'm excited to let you know that this year we have $10,000, up to $10,000 available for EV chargers for multifamily developments, and then up to $10,000 for EV readiness incentives for multifamily developments. So those can be applied for together or separately for a total of up to $20,000 per site. We do have incentives available for essentially all of our customers. We encourage you to go to our website if you're looking to buy an electric vehicle for your personal use or for your business. We can certainly help you out. If you could go to the next slide, please. And you may have heard that we have relaunched our new construction electrification program. We're going to continue to provide provide $2,500 per unit for affordable housing developments, for a total of up to $240,000 for the entire project. Also new to this year, we're offering incentives for farm worker housing units, $2,500 as well. Also for our private homeowners, we're offering $5,000 for all electric ADUs, accessory dwelling units. These units would have to be built to all electric standards. No gas infrastructure can be built to be eligible to apply. I will leave it there. Once again, we encourage you to go to our website. There's much more information available, and happy to answer any questions. And on to you, Chris.
Okay. So we're going to wrap this up by talking about the concierge services. And you know, several times I've said, I can help you with that. I can help you with that. This is where this comes in. So Central Coast Community Energy is providing this assistance to help you get started with electrification. If you are a Central Coast Community Energy customer, your property needs to be a customer of the CCA. You'll go to the website, and I pasted the link in the chat. Find the tab that says Concierge Service, submit the application. We are going to do a short interview with you, figure out exactly what you're looking for, when you're looking for it, and then we'll come out and do a site assessment. And that's our preliminary feasibility study that will help you figure out, do you have enough electrical capacity for this? What would we need to do to upgrade? Where is the best place in your parking lot to meet all of those codes that I was talking about? Then we can help you with getting bids from contractors and choosing the right idea that's good for you and how you want this installed, by whom and when. And at the same time, we'll work with you on the rebate. So we can help you get the rebate applications completed, and also look at the other things that are out there like federal tax credits, and prepare you for doing all of this. So the way to get started with this is to go to the commercial transportation program. That's the first of the two links that I posted in the chat. Click the concierge tab and fill that application out. And if you're not quite ready yet, that's okay too. So the next slide, please, Jeff. Oh, Sophia, sorry, I'm looking at Jeff and I can't stop that. So hit that website and fill out that application. If you still have a few questions about how this is going to work with you, or questions about how it could work with some of the other programs, please contact your account rep and they will get you started on the right page, right track. Do you need some more information? I mentioned we have some toolkits available. They are also on that concierge tab. When you scroll down, you'll see some toolkits. Those, I wonder if I can share my screen. It's easier to show you. I cannot. So that's okay. So you scroll down and you'll see some toolkits. Those toolkits have some surveys that you can issue to your residents or employees to figure out how many charging stations you would need. Some guidance about placement, some checklists that you go through for the process of preparing for installation, and then just some general information about what to consider. Those are really helpful for getting started.
And
Any
Chris,
other questions?
you should be able to share your screen now. I think I just changed the settings.
Perfect. So let me show you the so this is the page that I have been talking about, and you'll click this tab that says Concierge Services. Here's that short application you fill out. These are the toolkits. We have a lot of questions down here about who's eligible for the program and how do you know if the rebate funds are available. I'm going to click on this toolkit and you'll see what this looks like. So our first page is a draft of a survey that you could send to your residents and understand how many of them have EVs now and how many are thinking about it. And then some of those other things that I talked about. How far do they drive? Do they have charging at work? We also discussed some of the policies. This is where we can talk about things like how do you charge for charging? Are the stations open to guests? What are the roles and responsibilities? Who's in charge of reporting a station that might be not functional at the moment? Some more drawings about ADA access. This is a big question for everybody. And then the last thing is that planning checklist. Things to think about and talk about with your designer and installer. So these are all on the website as well. So we encourage you to cruise through here. And we look forward to receiving your application soon. I'm going to stop sharing. And we have some little time for some questions. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask now.
We do have one question, and I'm going to give this one to Dan for the EV rebates. I just lost my question. There we go.
I'm happy to answer the question.
Okay.
I did also type it into the chat. So
there it is. Thank you.
The Electrify Your Ride program is a post-purchase or post-installation rebate. So this would, you would apply for the program after the chargers are in the ground. However, we do anticipate that this program is going to run through our fiscal year and most likely beyond. All of this is contingent on funding availability. We encourage you to check in with us, and we'd be happy to provide you with a status of how much funding is left. But again, I'm fairly confident that within 6 months or even later, we will be able to accommodate providing rebates to your project. I do want to also note that the new construction electrification program, that is a program where you can apply before the development is finished. You could apply as soon as you'd like, assuming that you have the appropriate entitlements or authorization to do so. For that program, we would reserve funding, and then we would pay you when the project is done, either when we receive a certificate of occupancy or some type of notice of completion. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions for Chris or for Dan? All right, next slide, please, which I believe should be our closing slide. All right, so this is, Chris, I didn't see your contact information in the chat.
Jeff, I'm sorry.
I'm dropping it in the chat this moment.
Sorry to interrupt here, but it looks like Jonathan has a question, so I'm going to allow him to speak here.
Sure.
All right, Jonathan, you should be set to ask your question.
Hi, good morning. My question is for the charging stations. I saw the incentive was up to 10,000 for multifamily units and up to 10,000 for the readiness section. I never installed one of these before, so is that sufficient? Is that a sufficient amount of money, $20,000 to install these at a property? Would that cover the whole cost, or would there be like a portion that would have to be paid for the developer, landlord?
You're on mute, Dan.
I think with all things construction, certainly this applies to installing electric vehicle chargers. I think the answer is it depends on the project. How much how much equipment you're putting in, how much electrical work on the panel, or trenching out to the parking lot. There's a lot of variables that are going to increase costs fairly significantly. I can say that this is a very good incentive for this type of work for level 2 charging stations. And I may want to defer to Chris to see if she has any kind of further cost information, but I hope I was able to sort of answer your question, and we'd be happy to chat offline if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Regarding
And then
that.
another question is, if we apply for the concierge service, does the program kind of set you up with a contractor to help you, or do you have to find those contractors yourself, or how does that work?
So Jonathan, what we're going to do is we will get you at least 3 bids from local contractors if you don't have somebody that you're using already.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of funding from the state of California requires a really special certification. So we look for that as well to make sure that you're going to maximize all of the funding available. So what the electrical contractor will not do, however, is if you have to repave your entire parking lot, or if we have to build a new sidewalk, we'll work with you on finding the person who's going to do that too, because that is not going to be the electrical contractor.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right, well, thank you everybody for attending. Our contact information is here up on the screen. If you have any questions about any programs and you want to reach myself or Sophia directly, feel free to just put our name into either of those emails, and they will likely forward them to us. And then, but if you have particular questions for Chris, please contact her. She's very reachable and very enthusiastic about this program, and so we hope you take advantage of that. Thank you again for joining us, and we will hopefully see you on the next slew of webinars in 2023. Thanks, everybody.